We are going to begin Revelation chapter 18. This is a 41st lesson. Can you believe that? 41 weeks we've been in this book. But here's the thing. We've had to kind of set the stage to understand things. But now that we've got all the little stuff, we kind of plow through chapters. So we're actually going to get through all of 18 today. Any bets on this at all? Good. We're Nazarenes. We don't bet. So chapter 18, let me read this for us first. And as I read it, I want you guys to be listening for the things that stick out to you, right? What words stick out? What phrases? What ideas just kind of catch your attention as we're reading through? Okay. So he talked about the woman on the beast. And then he says, after this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his splendor. He called out with a mighty voice, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. It has become a dwelling place of demons, a haunt of every foul spirit, a haunt of every foul bird, a haunt of every foul and hateful beast. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And the merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxury. Then I heard another voice from heaven say, come out of her, my people, so that you do not take part in her sins, so that you do not share in her plagues. For her sins are heaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Render to her as she herself has rendered, and repay her double for her deeds. Mix a double draw for her in the cup she mixed. As she glorified herself and lived luxuriously, so give her a like measure of torment and grief. Since in her heart she says, I rule as a queen, I am no widow, and I will never see grief. Therefore her plagues will come in a single day, pestilence and mourning and famine, and she will be burned with fire. For mighty is the Lord God who judges her, and the kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived in luxury with her will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning. And they will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, alas, alas, the great city, Babylon, the mighty city. For in 1 hour your judgment has come, and the merchants of the earth weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore. Cargo of gold, silver, jewels, and pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, scarlet, all kinds of scented wood, all articles of ivory, all articles of costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, olive oil, choice flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots, slaves and human lives. The fruit for which your soul longed has gone from you, and all your dainties and your splendor are lost to you, never to be found again. The merchants of these wares who gained wealth from her will stand far off in fear of her torment, weeping and mourning aloud. Alas, alas, the great city, clothed in fine linen, in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, with jewels, and with pearls. For in 1 hour all this wealth has been laid waste, and all the shipmasters and seafarers, sailors, all whose trade is on the sea, stood far off, and they cried out as they saw the smoke of her burning, what city was like the great city? And they threw dust on their heads as they wept and mourned, crying out, alas, alas, the great city, where all who had ships at sea grew rich by her wealth. For in 1 hour she has been laid waste. Rejoice over her, O heaven, you saints and apostles and prophets, for God has given judgment for you against her. Then a mighty angel stood up, took up a stone like a great millstone, and threw it into the sea, saying, with such violence, Babylon the Great will be thrown down and will be found no more. And the sound of the harpist and the minstrels and the flutists and trumpeters will be heard in you no more. And an artisan of any trade will be found in you no more. And the sound of the millstone will be heard in you no more. And the light of a lamp will shine in you no more. And the voice of the bridegroom and the bride will be heard in you no more. For your merchants were the magnates of the earth, and all nations were deceived by your sorcery. And in you was found the blood of the prophets and of the saints, and of all who have been slaughtered on the earth. This is the word of God for the people of God. And a crazy word, isn't it? Okay, that was a lot. Now, tell me through that lot, what's some of the things, we got a few things that stuck out to you. Phrases, words. Danny? Okay, so we're definitely seeing a connection to those who are profiting off of this sinful action. That's going to be a really important part as we break this down. What else? Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. So and then we're going to kick off with that part right there with that question. So fallen is Babylon the Great, this idea of demons. So now we have, are these demons literal? What's going on with this? What is this aspect of demons? Because to be fair, this one sticks out, right? Because all of a sudden we're like, whoa, like you're actually naming the demoniacs, right? The demons. So that's a good observation. We're going to actually start with that one when we kick off. Anything else? Yeah, so all of a sudden they're mourning because they're losing income. You're definitely noticing that connection with them. Okay, so who is the her, right? Who is the pronoun pointing to? So we're gonna have to address that as well. Okay, and if God is still giving his people a chance, then what does that say about this punishment? Like, I thought this was the end. I thought we were done. Right? I thought he'd already picked up people. This is what? So that definitely begs some questions, but it also points to the grace of God, right? Okay. So all of these are really important. All of these things are actually kind of the key stuff in this passage. And it's a long passage, but it really is one section. It reminds me of, because it's good apocalyptic literature, it reminds me of the kind of poetry that I hate. Let me give you an example. I'm not a fan of the book of Job. I'm really not a fan. How many of you have actually sat down and read Job, right? How big is that book? Right? There's like 42 chapters or something. Look, I'm not going to lie to you. You can tell the story of Job in 2-3 chapters max. The rest of it is fill, and it's this weird poetic fill, right? For the Lord of the great knows that the behemoth and the Leviathan live in the deep, and the man who believes in the deep. And you're like, oh, stop. It's like whoever wrote that was like Shakespeare's great grandfather, and they just wrote soliloquies and just things that we didn't need to hear, right? So this is kind of long this way, and this is why it can be hard to interpret, because it's apocalyptic literature, right? Which means that it's meant to be grandiose. It's meant to be large and over the top. That's the point of it, right? It's supposed to be more than we need. That's the idea of it. But because it's more than we need, if I start saying something like, I want to tell a story about how I want Kyle to maintain that haircut because I like it. I'm going to do a positive thing on Kyle because I like Kyle's haircut, right? And so all I had to do was write a sentence that says, I like Kyle's haircut, ergo, keep your haircut, right? What did I say? I got to the point. I like it. I'm a fan of it. So I think he should keep it. But then imagine if I start doing this. I like Kyle's haircut. The way it brings out his ears and the sides remind me of when I looked at him as a young child and knew that he would grow into something else, and I hope he'd make wise choices. And I hope that he keeps the choices to maintain that thing that he has on his head right now. For in the same way that my blankie covers me at night, Kyle's strands will warm his noggin and keep the gray matter beneath it at a temperature that will be safe and dry. For like the hairs on the platypus, the hairy duck, so Kyle's hairs will keep him warm. Let him not lose the hair on his head. Okay, now imagine that if we interpreted all that the way we do Revelation. Well, so what does the platypus stand for, right? And why the hairs on the platypus? Is it because the platypus has a poisonous thing, and somehow the hair on the platypus could cause death? And if Kyle cuts his hair, then does that mean that there's going to be death in the world, and we're all going to become these weird, odd creatures that nobody has really seen? And is the platypus real? Because I've never been to Australia, and it's on the bottom of the earth. And how can it be on the bottom of the earth if the platypus is there and it's walking upside down? The world is flat. Right? We come up with ridiculous notions because things are big and we want to nitpick it apart, right? So what we want to do with a passage like this is kind of get the idea, what is he saying? And then the rest makes sense, right? So what is he saying? And then the rest makes sense. So we start off But we're going to start off actually with these first questions that who is the her? Let's start there. Okay. So we just got done in chapter 17. And he says in 17, come and I'm going to show you the judgment of the great whore who's seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the wine of whose fornication the inhabitants of the earth have drunk. So he carried me away to a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names. It had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was clothed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold and jewels and pearls. And on her forehead was written a name, a mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of whores and the earth's abominations, right? And so we learned last week that this imagery is this woman on the beast is this representation of all the stuff that allures us, right? The things that we're attracted to in the world. It's not necessarily a female person. It's not even sex necessarily we're attracted to. It's all the things that allure us. And the things that allure us in the world are power, right? Our money, our fame, our provision, even the security allures us, right? We want to be secure. So we take steps to secure things. We want to have purpose. That allures us. You're telling me that with you, I can have purpose. Those things draw us in, right? These things are important. And so she draws us in, but she rides the beast. And remember, what is the beast? Does anybody remember what the beast is? Okay, kind of. So the beast is a representation. The devil gives his power to the beast, but the beast represents these ways that man has created to bring these things. That man has created these ideologies that says, okay, I know, I mean, if we take any person, just they're born and you raise them up and you drop them off in desert island, here's what they're going to say. I need something to provide for me. I need protection. I have fears. And I need purpose. And so we start to try to find those things. And as we come together as a people, we're supposed to look to God to get all of those things, right? God is the one who looks at us. In fact, this is what it means to be human. To be human, I heard the greatest thing today. To be human is to be that creation that was created to commune with God. That's what it means to be human, right? But if I don't look to God, I look to other places. And so I start to create ideas. Okay, I need protection. I've got enemies attacking me over there. So here's how we do protection. I'm going to find a way to counter that attack, and we're going to create armies, or I'm going to do protection by building a wall, or whatever it is that I'm going to do. And provision, we're going to start making farms, and I need more than that because it's not enough to feed me. There's drought seasons, so to make more, what we'll do is I'm going to start selling the excess. To sell the excess, I'm going to create an economy. And I'm going to start bringing people in here. We're going to do this, and we start creating an economy. So I got my provision, I got my protection. I need purpose in the world, and my purpose is it's the obvious purpose. It's life, liberty, it's happiness. These are my purposes in the world. It's for me to be happy, and the things that make me happy and they make other people happy. This is my purpose in life. And so we start to create all of these things, and this is what every single nation does. And this is the beast. These things are not bad of themselves. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, those are very godly traits when we look to God for those. Economy is a perfectly fine thing, right? When we look to God for those. Protection is an okay thing when we look to God for those, right? But when we don't, we create this beast. And this beast is the backdrop on which all civilization has been built forever in the history of humanity. If you go back historically, you will find these principalities, these spiritual realms behind everything that says, this is what we're building here. This is why we're building this. This is why we're building this. It's our great endeavors to provide, protect, and give us purpose in everything that we do. Everything from the Roman Empire to Babylon to Nazi Germany, even to Canada, to Mexico, to America, every single nation is built with the same idea. They just approach it different ways. And so the beast is this ideology, and the woman is the enticement that draws us to this. And so he talks about how she's going to fall. She's going to pay for her crimes, for what she has done. And he says, after this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority. The earth was made bright with his splendor. And he called out with a mighty voice, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. It has become a dwelling place of demons, a haunt of every foul spirit, a haunt of every foul bird, a haunt of every foul and hateful beast. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxury. So with those 3 verses, just those 3 verses right there. Okay, so here we have these three verses. In the first one, she's talking about how judgment is coming upon Babylon, right? So judgment's coming on Babylon. But why is judgment coming on Babylon? So the first line explains it. This new angel comes out and says, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. Remember, what does Babylon represent? What is Babylon in the scripture? Okay, it's a socio-political arena. Yeah, Babylon is, the original Babylon was a city that was the enemy god. It says, we're the superpower, we're taking over the world. And Babylon, to be fair, was like the first nation to kind of take over the world. And they're like, we are the great Babylon. And so God sends the people into Babylon and says, go, you want some of that? Go get you something. They go into exile in Babylon, and then God himself destroys Babylon, right? And so Babylon is destroyed, broken up, and then eventually we end up with the Roman Empire. And so Babylon becomes the great example of nations, of empires, of socio-political ideologies that oppose God, that we don't need God, we can do this. So that's Babylon. And Babylon in the first century would have been Rome, right? But then they're like, Rome is Babylon, right? So, okay. So fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, this representation, because it's become a dwelling place of demons, a haunt of every foul spirit, bird, hateful beast. What does that mean? What do you think that means, that it's become a place of demons? It's become well, let's skip demons, because demons is the one that we get hung up on. Now we hear demons, we're like, I mean, are there demons there? Yeah, I would say there are, but that's not the big picture here. It's also the haunt of every foul spirit. What does that mean? And what's the difference between a foul spirit and a demon? Okay. Well, what about the next line? The haunt of every foul bird. But foul means nasty, rotten, sour, right? Foul, it's bad, it's detestable. So foul birds are theirs. And also every foul and hateful beast. So there's 4 lines right there. We have to look at this and we have to understand, first off, this is apocalyptic literature. There's a lot of cool poetry in it, right? And so think of like the haiku. A haiku has rules to it, right? What are the rules to a haiku? Is that what it is? 575? I never remember, so I was really hoping you'd answer. Okay, a haiku is 5 syllables, then 7 syllables, then 5 syllables, right? The table is red. I love to eat on its top. The apple also is red. That could be like a 60s song, huh? I don't. Anyway, okay, but it's got rules. Okay. All right. Now I'm getting heckled by the 15-year-old. Okay. Here's the thing, though. Some of the things to look for in poetry are things like duplication, like parallelism. What's parallelism? Let me say the same thing twice. Oh, how I love you. My heart goes to you. I would never leave you. This is where I will stay, right? I'm saying the same thing twice, same thing twice. It's poetry. So here we're seeing kind of the same thing twice. It's become a dwelling place of demons, a haunt of every foul spirit. Does that sound better if it's one sentence now? Okay. A haunt of every foul bird, a haunt of every foul and hateful beast. They're all animals, right? Does that make sense? Spirits and else. So what is he saying? That the spiritual and the physical, they're both become detestable here. He's not saying that it's just, oh, the bad birds, vultures came out and the good birds stayed away and the good demons, or the good demons, the good spirits left and the bad spirits came. Pastor talked about good demons in church. Shh. Right? What first off, he's bringing out that the spiritual and the physical, they're together, and we need to remember that. Right? And so what happens in one happens in the other. But this is a bad thing that she's done. And so she's going to be punished because of this, and because all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. So what happens when you drink of wine? If you drink a bunch of wine, what's going to happen eventually? You get drunk. Then what happens when you're drunk? Somebody make the world stop spinning. Right? You drunk, you fall down, you collapse upon yourself. And so here she says, the nations have drunk. That's why. For the wine of the wrath of her fornication, the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And the merchants have grown rich from the power of her luxury. So everybody's drank from her cup. What was in the cup? Do you guys remember from last week? What's in the cup? The abominations, right? Sinful things. In other words, it says we're drinking of the cup. It's not saying we're really drinking wine. He's saying, what he's saying is we're drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak, right? If I say you're drinking the Kool-Aid, what do I mean? That you're following people, right? You bought into something ridiculous. And that's kind of what he's saying here. You guys are drinking the Kool-Aid. Like, I believe that if that was a thing back then, that's what John would have wrote. Y'all are drinking the Kool-Aid from the cup of your sins. She is giving you, it's abominations, and you guys are all drinking it. You're drinking so much, actually drunk on this stuff. And now you're going to fall. You're going to fall on yourself. Because if I do sinful things and sin brings death and destruction, what's eventually going to happen to me? Right? If I smoke 2 packs of Marlboro Reds a day for 50 years, eventually what's probably going to happen to my lungs? How bad is that, man? Right? If I smoke meth all day long for years on end, what's going to happen? My teeth are going to fall out. My jaw's going to get tired. My bank account's going to be broke. I'll get kicked out. Right? That's what's going to happen. Bad things happen when we do bad things. Right? And this is what he's saying. That, yes. Yeah, intoxicated with the things of this world. Thank you, Marlene. That's it. That's what we're doing, is we get intoxicated with the things of this world. And when there's sinful things, they fall upon us. We collapse upon ourselves. And so what we're seeing here in Revelation, and I want to clarify this because I had a conversation with someone, well, in Revelation, you see God all kinds of violent. God's not violent in Revelation, right? God himself does not act violently in Revelation. What we see is God saying, you know what? I'm going to let this happen. And if I keep doing stupid's going to happen to me, right? Someone once told me when I was a raging alcoholic, someone once told me, you keep driving drunk, you're going to kill somebody. Nah, man, I know what I'm doing. He's like, man, if you keep driving around speeding, eventually you're going to get a ticket. You keep driving around drunk, eventually you're going to kill somebody, right? You keep doing stupid things, eventually stupid things are going to happen because death is the intrinsic result of sin, right? If I'm speeding 100 miles an hour down Highway 1 through Big Sur, right, around all the corners and all that stuff down there, I might get a ticket. That would be the punishing factor of sin. But what's the other thing that might happen? I might die. Death is the intrinsic value. It's just naturally going to happen. It's not a punishment thing. It's not that all of a sudden the government punished me because I died, because it was illegal. The government didn't punish me. I just died on account of I did a thing that leads to death. Okay, so evil cannot stand. And the nations that built themselves up due to this drunkenness collapse upon themselves. Okay, we're going to have to scoot forward a little bit now. Okay, now 4 through 8. Then he summons Babylon. I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, so you don't take part in her sins, so that you don't share in her plagues, for her sins are heaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. So what is he saying to Babylon? What is he saying to the people there? What did Pastor Kathy point out? What's God telling the people? You have a choice. Get out of there. He's saying, come out of Babylon. It's a summons to come out. And we see this from Isaiah also. Remember, we got a lot of Isaiah here. In fact, the very fallen is Babylon comes from Isaiah. It says fallen is Babylon when they talk about Babylon literally, 700 years earlier. And so now we hear, go out from Babylon, free from Chaldea, declare this with the shout of joy, proclaim it, send it forth to the end of the earth, says the Lord has redeemed his servant Jacob. So this is from Isaiah. This is 700 years earlier. And he's talking to people, come out of Babylon. Don't be a part of that. And so here we see it again in Revelation. He's telling the people, come out of Babylon, which insinuates what? That the people are in Babylon. They're participating in this. They're a part of this. So what does that mean to come out of Babylon then? What would that look like? So let's say I live in a town in a make-believe town in the middle of America that's called Babylon. And man, this town is bad. It's got drugs, gangs. It's got people who think Star Wars is better than Star Trek. It has got like the worst of the worst there. Okay. So God says, come out of Babylon. What do I do? If I'm reading this, what does that mean for me? Did you guys hear Pastor Kathy said? Walk away from your lifestyle. Okay. And this is the part that we need to understand, the part that we really struggle with in our modern Christianity today. Our modern Christianity has somehow taught us the world bad, God good, get away from the world to go to God, that they're diametrically opposed to each other, right? I mean, we even love the not of this world tattoo, which I get the concept behind it, but it's further this thinking of this world is bad, I'm leaving it. And so I don't want anything to do with it. I'm going to get out. And so we come inside the church and we hide from the unholy world. And we see churches that do that. We don't allow those kind in here. We don't want them in our youth group. We just do our thing. We do not hang out with you. We don't hang out with you. We'll have nothing to do with secular work. We're all going to kind of just live in our own little Mennonite community, if you will, separate from the world. Because this has come out of Babylon. But the problem with that is that a literal interpretation of this violates our responsibility as witnesses to the world. Because what are we, according to Peter? According to what God told Moses, we are the royal priesthood, which means our task is to minister to the world. And we're supposed to share the gospel to the world by our lifestyle, by just living differently. The world's supposed to say, well, that's odd. That's dumb. That's dumb. That's dumb. Just like they looked at Noah. Look at that moron building a boat out there. What an idiot. It's a desert. He's building a boat. I don't even know what a boat is. Like, he's got a boat. That's all he does. He looks stupid until it rained. And then what happened? He's looking pretty smart. I mean, at that point, if I'm Noah, I'd be selling tickets, but I'm an entrepreneur. I'm just saying, right? You're like, I know God said you can't get on the boat, but I built some little life rafts on the back. Y'all can hang on there for like $10 a piece, something. I wouldn't do that, right? So the point is this. This is the reality of following God. If I live God's life, what happens if I'm living a godly life? I mean, how many of you have done that? I came out of a pretty rough world. As soon as I did, they're like, what's wrong with you, man? Oh, I don't drink. I don't do that. Are you one of those guys now? You're too good for us? I'm like, no, I'm just living this life. I just want to live my life. I have no problem with you. You're welcome here, but I'm going to live my life this way. I think it's important. And I look pretty stupid. A year after year after year until all of a sudden, they're like, you know what? You might kind of have it together. So I had a friend ask me once, dude, how did you stop going to jail? Check this out. Found out the secret. It's killer. So they don't teach you this. The way to keep from going to jail is to not break the law. Check that out, right? Turns out, go figure, I didn't know this. Turns out there's not a giant conspiracy against me. In fact, I found out having friends who are officers, they actually don't like arresting me because, first off, I'm an annoying person in the back of the car. You guys think I'm annoying now? You should have seen me when I was an alcoholic tweaker. I'm just saying. Imagine this on meth. Okay. Yeah. So that was annoying. Yeah. Kyle's got his eyes like, oh man. Yeah. Okay. And then there's paperwork. They got to do paperwork. And then they got to go to court and they got to do this. So they don't like arresting you. You actually have to work to be arrested. Right? These are the mentalities, the things that we have to see that God says come out of that, live differently. Carol Rotz says that God's people are called to renounce the idolatrous practices of pagan society and to separate themselves from a corrupt, though seductive, socioeconomic system. How many of you guys have heard or even tried the, hey, you know what? My life is a mess here. I'm going to move away to start over. Right? We've all tried that. If you haven't tried, I guarantee you have a friend who moved somewhere. So I'm going to get a fresh start. I'm going to go somewhere else. Now, sometimes that works. Sometimes it does. But most of the time, does that work? If you have a friend who's like an alcoholic or a drug addict and they say, well, I need to get away from this town. That's the problem, is the town, right? We've all heard that. And they leave. Does it work? Not usually. Why? Oh, I just picked the wrong town. Oh, what's the problem? It's there. Wherever you go, there you are. The problem is it's not LB. There is no problem with LB. There is no problem with Los Banos. This is an amazing town. If I have problems, it's because I have problems. And so if I'm a Christian in this town and I look around and say, well, this town's corrupt, there's gangs, there's violence, all these people coming in from the Bay, everybody's ruining everything. Good Christian, I need to leave because God says to come out of Babylon. Well, no. By coming out of Babylon means I'm not going to participate in the gangs. I'm not going to participate in that lifestyle. However, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to be a witness for my neighbors. That's my responsibility. Okay, and then he says, render her as she has rendered herself, and repay her double for her deeds. Mix a double draught for her cup in the cup that she mixed. So it says, give her a double portion. Now, what God isn't doing is saying she's going to get twice as much as she deserves. The phrase double portion is really just an idiom. It means give it 110%. What does it mean to give something 110%? Is that a physically possible thing? No, right? It just means I'm giving it my all. I'm really going to give it my all. So saying give her a double portion doesn't mean like, here's what normally would happen. She's going to get double back for what she's done. It's simply saying she's going to get the full portion of what she's done. Like when you sin, the fullness of it's eventually going to come back on you. This is physics. If I'm in a tub of water and I push a bunch of water away from me and I let go, what's going to happen? The water's going to go that way, and then it's going to return the exact same amount. I'm going to get the full repercussions of what I've done. No mercy, no grace. Yeah. And then she says, give her a double draught for her cup that she mixed. Verse 7, as she glorified herself and lived luxuriously, so give her a like measure of torment and grief, since in her heart she says, I rule like as a queen. I'm no widow. I will never see grief. Okay, let's stop there for a second. So what does that mean if she says in her heart, I rule as a queen, I'm no widow, I'll never see grief? Do what? Okay, she's definitely boasting. She's absolutely boasting. And it's hard for us to understand what she's boasting about in today's world because none of this makes sense to us. Like if you think of a widow today, what do you guys think of? What's a widow? All right, that's it, right? A woman lost her husband. I mean, and then what? Oh, then she lost her husband. Sometimes she remarries, sometimes she didn't. She's a widow. I mean, all kinds of widows. But in this time, what did it mean to be a widow in the first century in Rome? What happens if I'm a woman and my husband dies? Okay, I can't work because I'm a woman. I'm a burden. What else? Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a great one too. So not only can I can't find regular work. No one's going to hire me. No one's going to treat me with any respect whatsoever. I can do nothing, but I have to survive. And so to be fair, one of the only ways to survive, especially if you're a young widow, is now I'm going to go prostitute myself because you know what? I don't want to, but I have to do what I do. I watched a movie the other day, Bill Murray's St. Vincent. Oh my goodness. And I love it because there's a scene where he has, where he tells he's got a little boy that hangs out. He's just a angry old man. The little boy comes in and he's got his weekly lady there. And he tells the boy, she's a lady of the night. It's like, what is that? And then he stops and thinks, he goes, maybe the last form of an honest living. And I thought, you know what? I mean, I get it, but he's not exactly right. Like, here's what it's all I have. Right. So yeah, they're nothing. And so it's meant to be derogatory. And so for her to say that she's a widow means now I'm dependent on other people. I'm dependent on their mercy. And in the first century Rome, in an honor shame system, if I'm dependent on somebody, I'm a burden to society. And if I don't want to be a burden, my only other option is to be a prostitute. And so now what do? She's like, I'm not that. I'm going to succeed. I'm prideful. I've got this. I'm a queen and I will never see grief. Not you can't hurt me. I am too powerful to be hurt. So she boasts, her prideful heart's revealed in this delusional soliloquy. I love this word soliloquy. You don't hear a soliloquy enough. Do you guys know what soliloquy is? What a soliloquy is? This is like the only thing I remember from my English literature class. Soliloquy is such a great word. I once convinced a couple of boys that they needed to use the word soliloquy anytime something was cool. Remember that, Trina? Then boys would walk around every time they thought something could be like soliloquy. I was just doing an experiment to see if people would just use words randomly. A soliloquy is just a person talking by themselves. So when you see a movie or something, right? And then all of a sudden everybody's gone from the room and that person all of a sudden goes off on this, oh, poor me, for I was once out there, but I will come back. I will make my world up. I will do this. It's a soliloquy, right? So it's this person kind of talking to themselves to let the audience know what they're thinking, because that's the best way to do it. So Shakespeare does it all the time. That's why, in fact, when I wrote this, I thought, man, we're going to do soliloquy enough. And so I posted on my Facebook today, I don't talk to myself. I just soliloquy in case somebody's watching, because I'm not convinced that I'm not actually part of a sitcom. Have any of you guys ever thought that? Like maybe I'm part of a sitcom or something, and like, because I'm just saying I might be entertaining to watch. So sometimes I need to soliloquy because nobody likes dead air. Nobody wants to watch me all. Instead, I talk. So I talk. And when nobody's around, I talk more than I do when people are around. Like, not even kidding. Ask my wife. She's walked in. Yeah. See, she'll tell you. She's like, she's not even saying, Okay. So this woman goes off in this prideful, delusional soliloquy. And this is important. She's delusional. She thinks this is real. The empires, the things that we do, they think they're real. They think they're right. They think they have the power. And that's dangerous. She says, I'm not a widow. But then he says, therefore, her plagues will come in a single day, which means what? Doesn't mean it's going to have a 24 minutes. They're going to come quick upon her. Man, when you crumble, you crawl, you fall. Pestilence and mourning and famine, and she'll be born with fire, for mighty is the Lord who judges her. So pestilence and what? Mourning. She's going to grieve. So there's irony in her punishment. I'm a queen. Well, you're going to get pestilence. I don't grieve. You're going to mourn, right? I will never, I'll never be a widow. You're going to be burned with fire. Like there is irony in her punishment, which I kind of really like. And it kind of adds to the apocalyptic literature here, right? You do this, you do that. You guys, I think I've asked you before, have you guys ever read The Divine Tragedy by Dante? Like if you haven't, it's really great because it's definitely a classic. I want to say it's a 1,500 years old, something like that, maybe 1,000 years old. I don't know. Anyway, but Dante writes about going through hell, right? He has his tour guide, Virgil, walks him through hell, and all the punishments in hell kind of fit the crime, so to speak. So like backstabbers, they walk around and their back's always bleeding because, they hurt people, or those people who are fake, they look all beautiful. And you're like, you come near them, as you get close, start smelling like what? And they're rotting on the inside all the time. Like it's weird stuff. And you're like, okay, so this is kind of that mentality. I say that to say that this is written to a first century audience, right? It's not written to you. It's not. It's written to a first century audience with their type of understanding of this literature, of these images, things that would grasp their mind. If it was written to you, he would have said things that meant something to you, like you're going to be as frustrated as a Friday evening on the 101, right? Yeah, I saw your face. You're like, we all know, we've been there. You're like, I'm going to keep my Jesus. I'm going to keep my Jesus. I'm going to keep my Jesus. I can't keep my Jesus. I'm going to need to start drinking. Oh, where was I? Her punishment's going to be the same measures of glory and luxury. And then it says, for mighty is the Lord who judges her. So in other words, look, she's boasting. She's the queen of all that. But who judges her? God. And so what he's saying here is he's reminding us, God is mighty. Rome isn't mighty. The emperor isn't the mighty one. None of the nations are the mighty ones. Babylon wasn't the mighty one. Egypt wasn't the mighty one. France is not the mighty one. Canada is not the mighty one. America is not the mighty one. There are no mighty ones. God alone is the mighty one. And that's the message he's trying to say. Quit looking to these things. They have fake power. They think they have power and they're delusional. They believe they have power. They really believe they have superpowers. It's like, remember when everybody was going on the acid trips and you were like, and you hear the stories in school, they tell you about, yeah, some dude jumped off of a building on an acid trip, broke his legs, and he kept running, right? Because he's delusional. This is what we do. We act delusional, thinking, well, I've got it, I've got this, but we're being delusional. But God alone is the one who's great. And then we get into these laments. So 9 through 19 are really one section. So this part will go really quick. And the kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived in luxury with her will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning. They'll stand far off in fear of her torment and say, alas, alas, the great city, Babylon, the mighty city. For in 1 hour, I lost my place. For in 1 hour, your judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore. Cargo of gold, silver, jewels, all of these things that he lists, and human lives. The fruit for which you're so long, verse 14, is gone from you, and your dainties and your splendor are not lost to you, never to be found again. Then verse 15, the merchants of these wares who gained wealth from her will stand far off in fear and torment, weeping and mourning aloud. Alas, alas, the great city, clothed in fine linen, in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, with jewels and pearls. For in 1 hour, all this wealth has been laid waste. And all the shipmasters and seafarers, sailors, and all whose trade is on the sea stood far off. And they cried out as they saw smoke of her burning. What city was like the great city? And they threw dust on their heads, and they wept and they mourned, crying out, alas, alas, the great city where all who had ships at sea grew rich by her wealth. For in 1 hour she's been laid waste. Rejoice over her, O heaven, you saints, apostles, and prophets, for God has given judgment for you against her. Then a mighty angel stood up like a stone in a great millstone and threw it in the sea. Okay, we're just going to go to 19, actually. I went too far. So all the way to 19, we see three aspects of our world lamenting. We see the kings who represent the nations, the rulers, right? We see the merchants, our economic systems. And we see the seamen, those who actually bring the stuff, those who do the work to bring it, right? So we see all of these representations. But these three, each one of them laments the fire. What's the fire that they see? They see the fire burning because Babylon's burning. It's going down, just like when Sodom or Gomorrah was burned, right? It is going down. And remember when Sodom and Gomorrah were burning, what happened? What's the other part of this tale that always makes me want to drink a Coke? I get thirsty when I hear this part. Lot's wife gets turned into a pillar of salt. Then my mouth gets all, And I want to drink a Coke. Trina's laughing at me. That was a good joke. Okay. Why did Lot's wife turn and look? Okay, she got turned into salt because she looked back. But why did she look back? Why would you look back? Okay, disbelief, what did you say? She didn't want to let go, right? What does it mean? No looking back. Don't look back, right? Right. Happiness is Lubbock, Texas in my rear view mirror, right? I'm not looking back. That's who sang that song? Not Gene Autry. Okay, it doesn't matter. Okay, so don't look back, because looking back means don't go back to that world. Lot's wife looked back because, man, we had the nice house, the kids went to the good school, we had all the great things. They were the rich, uppity people. And she's like, but I left my pearl. Right? So these people see her burning, but this is where they got their power from. Because remember, the dragon gave power to the beast, which gave power to the people. And the people, it's funny because where the beast actually gets power? From the people. God gives us the power, and then we give it to the beast. And then we want it back. Oh, here, take our power, and then give it to us, right? We're the ones who feed the beast. And so they want their power back. And so they're looking at this. They're seeing it burning down. They're realizing everything we have is tied up into that. It's gone. And so they're just like Lot's wife, looking at Sodom and Gomorrah burning down. So they all three of them do four things the same way. And it's just meant to kind of say, this is what happens. Everybody does things the same way. First off, they all stand off. So if you go to verse 10, verse 15, and verse 17, every one of them, they do is they stand off. Look, if I'm with somebody, say I've got Brother Lewis here, he's got my back, right? And I'm like, Lewis has got my back, everything we do is wrong. I'm the entourage, I'm the rap entourage, right? Somebody wrote a song about the rap entourage. Who was it? Do you guys know what is a rap entourage? You got the rapper, bam, right? You got your Snoop Dogg or your Dre. I'm a little older school, right? Get your rapper. And then what do they all have? Yeah, they have the entourage. They have the people around him. Who are the people? I don't know. What do? They hang around him. And they think they're cool because they hang around him. We party with them. We're the entourage, right? So they're all cool. What do you guys do? Hanging with my man Dre. What's up? And they try to get in the pictures, even though they're back. They're like, why is this guy in the picture? Like, who is this dude, man? Is that Urkel? Right? And you're like, what? Okay. And then, so this is what's happening. But what happens if I'm hanging around somebody, and this person that I'm hanging around with, that's my support, my life, my provision, this person all of a sudden gets popped. Dude, police are coming to arrest this person. What am I going to do? Am I going to hang out? I'll hang here and wait for him, bro. I'm going down with you. Does that happen? I remember when my little brother got popped. Me and Trina had actually literally just started dating. And my little brother got popped for possession with the intent to distribute. And he called me up and he said, I won't call him in jail. He says, I'm going to prison. He said, they're going to take me to prison. Here's what I need you to do. I need you to go to my house right now and get all my stuff. I'm like, you want me to go get your stuff? Like, we lived on like different ends of the county. He lived in Bloomfield. I was up in Plotted. He's like, yeah, I need you to go get my stuff. Why? He goes, I need you to get over there before my friends get over there. I was like, what? And it occurred to me, I was like, yeah, because he's got his entourage, right? Because, this is my gang, my people. They got, they hang out with me. I provide for them. He thought he was a big baller and all this. He gets popped, and what happens? What happened? Where do your friends go as soon as you get popped? Man, they're the first ones to turn on you. They back off and they go see, right? Your friends turn on you. And so this is the reality of it. So they stand far off, which is say that they betray for survival. And this is what we see in the world at every level. Man, Enron's going down. I'm going to betray them for my survival, right? This person's going down. I'm going to betray them for my survival. We betray each other for our survival when we follow the beast. That's what happens every time. And so this is what we see. So they stand far off. I'm going to get back. I'm like, yeah, I'm sad she's burning, but I'm not going to put her out. I'm going to get out of the way so I don't get caught in the fire. Because I'm not here to help her. I'm just here to take from her. And then they weep and mourn, 9, 11, and 15b. And they weep and mourn. Why? Because someone said earlier, because they stored their treasure in Babylon. And so they share in her loss. Right? If my entire life is on this economic system, man, I'm losing it. Wars, they say that wars are the best way to make people rich. But here's the problem. Wars only make the victors rich. What happens to those who lose? Right? Remember what happened to the South even after the Civil War, right? Economic failure. We had to really change things to bring the South back up. When Germany was defeated the first time in World War I, right, and the Kaiser was defeated, economic collapse. So they tried to build again, this time using socialism, and then economic collapse again after they were defeated, right? And they only recently started to turn around. Anytime you lose a war, economic collapse. When you win a war, that's when you win, because I'm taking from you. It's like gambling. One person walks away from the table happy, the other person goes home, going to sleep outside because mama's not going to let him back in for losing all the rent money, right? One person goes away sad. So they weep and mourn, but they've stored their treasure in Babylon, which means that they share in her loss. Now, where does Jesus say we're supposed to store our treasure? And this is what he means. Say, look, quit looking to the earthly principalities to store your treasures in. That doesn't mean don't participate. It's okay. It's fine to have your Roth IRA, your retirement plan, to have equity in your home. Those are good things to have. They're even biblical things to have. But if everything that is about my existence is in those, what's going to happen when I lose them? Man, I was talking to a dear friend of mine. He is one of the most amazing Christians I've ever met. So faithful. And he was just randomly telling the story about how he had built up all his retirement and all that. And he was overseas during 9/11 and couldn't get a hold of his broker, lost all his money. He was overseas on a mission work, and then built up a retirement all over again, only to have it collapse in some when one of the banks went under, lost it again. He says, I'm on the third time building my retirement, but whatever, it's just a thing. I'm like, I love that, right? He doesn't get all sad. He's like, I'm sure he was sad, going, oh, that's a bummer. But you know what? It's not like, Black Friday or the stock market crash when people start committing suicide because they're tied to it. So they weep and mourn because they stored their treasures in Babylon, and so they share in her loss. And they cry out, woe, 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 all of them too. Now, the woes here contrast the woes that represent God's anguish. Remember at 8:13 when he says, woe is them, woe to the inhabitants. What is God saying when he says that? Woe to them. Or when the eagle cries over, it says, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, right? And all of these are the exact same word. Would you what? Beware, okay, but more than that, what's he saying? It's an anguish. It's like, man, I'm sad for you. I don't want that. So in those, earlier, we see God and the eagle saying this, the woes represent God's anguish. In reality, God laments for others, right? There's the thing that we see there, but here, these people are lamenting for their God. A true God laments for his people. Our God laments for us. But here, these people lament for their God because their God is being burned up. And this is kind of the irony that John's trying to draw out from us to see. They're lamenting the same way God lamented for us in anguish. They're lamenting for their God. It's the same words. Whoa, whoa. It's owie, owie, owie in Greek. And it's just an automatopoeia. I'm putting everybody's thought. No, an automatopoeia is a word that is what it sounds like roar. That's an automatopoeia. All right, so this is just an automatopoeia, right? Owie, 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 right? So, woe, woe, woe. And God laments for the people, but here they lament for their God. And it states that Babylon's fall, also they state that Babylon's fall is sudden and unexpected. We see this in verse 10, 17, and 19. It happens quickly. Like out of nowhere it falls. When the stock market crashes, bam, nations, they fall quickly, don't they? 1 second we're this, the next second we're that. I mean, I love being, I hope I get to be American forever, but man, there's an off chance one day I'm going to wake up and we're going to be eating egg rolls or something. I don't know, right? Like it could happen. Or Canadian bacon. I'm still thinking we need to be watching the Canadians. I'm just saying, they're sketchy. Verse 20. And then verse 20 gets kind of weird. Then all of a sudden it's rejoice over her, O heaven, you saints and apostles and prophets, for God has given judgment for her against you. So in Revelation 12:12, heaven was invited to rejoice that Satan's defeat had begun. Remember that? Rejoice, for he has fallen to earth, right? But beware, because he's going to earth where he's tried. So his defeat had begun there. Here we see the same thing. Heaven and the church are called to rejoice of the destruction of satanic systems had begun. So one was heaven rejoices that the destruction of Satan had begun. But now we see the work of the devil, right? Because the dragon came to earth. What happened? The dragon gave power to the beast in the ocean, which also had the beast on the land. And so we see this power coming down into these principalities, the world that we see, the governments, the isms, right? All the different things that we think are going to provide for us that we've done forever. These are satanic systems because they're born all the way. They can be traced up to the dragon. And so now that they're satanic systems, they affect us on earth. And so now he invites the angels, heaven to rejoice, but also the church, the people of God, all people. The saints, apostles, prophets. He's not saying saints separated from apostles. He's describing the people of the church. The church also rejoice because God has given judgment for you against her. God is doing this thing for us. And so we rejoice the destruction of the satanic systems. And then 21 through 24. Then a mighty angel stood up, took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it in the sea, saying, with such violence, Babylon, the great city, will be thrown down and will be found no more. And the sound of harpists and minstrels and of flutists and trumpeters will be heard in you no more. And an artisan of any trade will be found in you no more. And the sound of the millstone will be heard in you no more. And the light of a lamp will shine in you no more. And the voice of the bridegroom and the bride will be heard in you no more. This is one of those spots where you just needed to say it once, but he's saying the same thing over and over again. For your merchants were the magnates of the earth, and all the nations were deceived by your sorcery. And in you was found the blood of the prophets and of the saints and of all who were slaughtered on the earth. Okay, so first, this takes this millstone. What's a millstone? Millstone's a big old giant wheel, right? Big old giant round stone. And what is a millstone used for? Grinding, right? For grinding. You're like an ox and it pulls the millstone around, right? Throw the grain. And you see the ox walking around circle, and he's pulling this big old millstone around. And what is the oxen doing? The oxen is tied to the millstone. He's forced to do this work, right? So in one way, the millstone can represent the oppressive powers upon people. That the systems of our world have created oppressive powers on people. Remember we talked about the 4 horsemen? What happens when the black horse comes, the famine? Is it a famine for everyone? No, man. It's a famine for those who use wheat, barley. What is wheat and barley? It'd be like for those who need milk and eggs. What is milk and eggs today? If I said I need milk and eggs, I seen someone asking the other day on Facebook. I just need milk and eggs. I need the what? What do we call them? The staples, right? I need the basics. This is basic stuff. I just need basic food, milk, eggs, maybe some bread. Okay, that stuff super expensive. Can't afford it no more because of what our systems have done. But what does he say? But don't touch the price of the oil or the wine. Why? Because the luxury items are never touched. Why? Because what happens during war and violence in our systems, even the systems that we see now, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And they're like, we need it. Everybody, we all got to suffer a little bit, right? How many times have we heard that from politicians? Everybody's going to have to suffer a little bit. And then the working class, the poor people get poorer. And then what happens? The politicians give nothing up, right? Rich people give nothing up. This is the standard that he's saying here. So here he's saying we see the millstone, the sign of oppression on the people, but the millstone is thrown down into the sea. And in fact, he even says, with such violence, Babylon, the great city, will be thrown down and be found no more. So Babylon is thrown down in violence. Why violence? I thought God doesn't do violence. Why violence? Who's doing the violence? Themselves. God's not doing the violence. It's not God's violence, but violence is the response of reality to delusion. If I have a delusion, like here's an act of violence. If I'm standing on the edge of a cliff, I say, man, I watch cartoons and I know that if I don't look down, I can run off the cliff and I won't fall, right? Because you never fall until you look down in the cartoons, right? So if I go to do that, right? Shanoa, what are you going to say if you see me on the side of a cliff and I'm about to run off it? And I'd be like, no, I saw a cartoon. It's all cool. Don't worry about it. Are you going to be like, okay? No, why? Because what's going to happen? I'm going to die because I'm delusional. And when I jump off that cliff or walk off that cliff or run off that cliff, reality is going to do what reality does, and it's going to yank me down. And the response is going to be violent, right? Anything that we do that is fantasy into reality, reality rejects violently. And we see it in different forms, not just the physical violence, but we see it in violence in our relationships. If I get into a relationship with somebody and I practice a delusional aspect, like say I get in a relationship with somebody and I lie to them about who I am or something about me, what's going to happen in that relationship? Eventually, reality is going to bite me. It's going to react violently. So violence is the natural response to us injecting delusion, fantasy into reality. God is the ultimate reality. So if you try anything outside of God, you're investing in fantasy, and eventually it's going to respond violently. And so she goes down with great violence. If I look to systems that God says not like this, I say, well, yeah, it can be. I'm delusional, just like she was. And now I'm bringing delusion in the real world, because check this out. We all live in the real world, right? Whether we want to or not, we live in the real world that follows real laws. And those real laws do not care what you think or what you want. They just do what they do, don't they? You don't get to run off a cliff and say, gravity, you can't pull me down, because we've all agreed in the world that we don't believe in gravity anymore. Gravity, like, I don't need to hear you, blah, right? All gravity here is wah, 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 wham. So Babylon's thrown down with violence. The millstone represents this oppression from sin. And then there's this lack of music, word, needs, light. It indicates there's no life left in the satanic system. It's like I said, it's just a long poem describing the same thing over and over again. It's not, okay, the artisans are gone and now they're gone. We still need to wait. These guys are gone. We're not listing out the things. He's just kind of bringing a point across. He's beating a dead horse, if you will. There's going to be silence. These things aren't going to happen because these things right now are so dependent on Babylon. The delusion brought death and destruction, especially to those who participated in it. And I say that because if I participate in Babylon, it's going to bring death and destruction upon me. But even if I don't participate in Babylon, we get hit with it as well, don't we? Because it especially attacks those who are close to it, but what we do affects others. I tell you guys all the time, I get frustrated when people say, what I do is none of your business. See, that's the problem. Anything you do eventually is going to affect me. So it kind of is my business. You can't live your life in a vacuum. It doesn't matter where you're at or what you do. Whatever you do eventually affects me. Your inability to see that doesn't change it. See, reality also doesn't care whether you see it or not. It just is. If I close my eyes and run off a cliff, gravity's still going to pull. It's not going to be like, oh, well, you didn't see it, right? It doesn't care. Doesn't even consider that. So the satanic systems, and then in the end, the blood of the saints and the world, the satanic systems are responsible for the death in the church and death in the world. Carol Rotz says, society's response of unbelief, horror, and self-preservation are not surprising. The call to escape before the downfall provides an important caution. It's easy to look back at the first century Roman Empire and agree with the invitation to rejoice over the ruin of an oppressive world order. The certainty of God's judgment on all such evil powers gives hope as Christians anticipate the establishment of God's kingdom on earth. It's not as comfortable to recognize, however, our participation in contemporary socioeconomic and political entities. Again, so what she's saying is it's easy for us to look back and go, yeah, man, they got what they're coming to. So you look and say, yeah, it's going to come on you. You're doing that, doing stupid things. It's easy for us, even as Christians, to say that that's bad, but it's hard. It's hard for us to recognize that we participate in these powers. That somehow we have a hand in it. Let me give you an example for me. And I'm just going to pick on anybody else. I know for a fact that I participate in systemic racism that we see in the world. And I'm going to prove it to you. When I send my resume, I've told this to Kathy and to the board before, when I sent my resume here. Do you remember my resume, Kathy? What was on the top of my resume? There were two things up there. The first thing, what's normally the first thing you put on the top of your resume? Okay, my name was there. So what's my name? Raul Granillo. So if you look at a piece of paper and it says Raul Granillo, what does this about to look like to you? What'd you say, Kyle? Like a Mexican. Yeah. I know that. I absolutely know that. So you know what was right next to my name? Family photo. Yep, Marlene remembers a family photo. There was a picture of me with my white wife and my white kids. Because here's what I know, that my chances of getting hired increase dramatically if they see a face and it's white. I'm not convinced this church would have hired me if they hadn't seen my face. I mean, I get that they got to do the Skype and all of that stuff, but if we'd have just done a radio thing and I'd had a Mexican accent, they might have had second thoughts and they might not have even realized it. And I'm not even sure it's true there, but I participated. I recognize that I have a privilege, right? That I have white skin. And to be fair, it affords me a lot of good stuff. It's hard for us to admit that we participate in that in the world because nobody wants to say that. Because to be fair, especially the word racist today is as derogatory as calling somebody a pedophile, right? It really is. Don't call me racist. I'm not a racist. I'm not a pedophile. We don't want those names, and so we refuse to admit it. So it's hard for us to confess our sins. And that's one of the biggest pushbacks. And there's a lot of areas. So I'm just using that as an example. We need to be okay with recognizing where do I participate in systems, whether I see it or not, because these systems are exactly what God is talking about. Any last questions, comments? Sienna, anything on the chat? Good job, by the way, Sienna, handling the chat back there. Let's pray, because Kyle got compared to a platypus. Yeah, let's pray. Father, I love you and I thank you. And I pray, Lord, that you would guide us. I pray that you would help us to open our eyes in confidence and humility to recognize all of these principalities, all of these satanic systems in the world, Father, that we're not intentionally doing, but that we do participate in, so that we can start to step away and live differently so others would see them. Help us to be those who would open our eyes first, who would welcome that light that you shine upon us into our world, Father, and that we would be willing to see what it is that you have for us to see, so that we would flee from Babylon while becoming a witness to those same people. I pray that you bless each one of us and use us, Father. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.